Thank you for listening to the Remote No Pressure podcast. Be sure to sign up for our mailing list at remotenopressure.com. And if you like what you listen to here on the podcast, be sure to leave us a review on your podcast platform, be it iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or whatever you're using. It helps. Growing up with a nickname like Bug, we wonder if this week's guest, Catie, really ever had a choice when it came to fly fishing. A native East Coaster, she tells us her stories of catching her first fish, and yes, we even have pictures of her with her first fish at remotenopressure.com/blog, and we also put up her TED Talk as well. She did a great TED Talk there in Boulder, Colorado. On this episode, she shares with us the universal truths gleaned from experiences outside and the lessons we all start to learn through time in the wilderness. Currently based in Boulder, Colorado, she works as a freelance creative and producer for fly fishing, outdoor, and wellness-based brands committed to making a difference. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. All right, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, we have Catie Webster from catiewebster.com joining us. Thank you very much, Catie, for taking some time with us.
Sure, no problem.
Now, one of the main reasons I reached out to you, obviously your experience and your passion for the outdoors means a lot. But on your website, on catiewebster.com, there's a particular sentence on the About section, which, by the way, is beautifully crafted. You did a great job writing that. But something that you wrote on there were, as a result, my writing is largely focused on the universal truths gleaned from my experiences outside and the lessons we all stand to learn through time in wilderness. Can you tell us about some of those important lessons that you feel like you've learned through the years?
This sort of started with the first fish that I ever caught. I was 6 years old, and we were at my family had a lake house in the North Carolina mountains, and my dad promised to teach me how to fish that summer. Spent the whole summer teaching me how to tie knots and dig up worms, and made me sit down at the dock and just be patient and sit in my little deck chair, and covered me in sunscreen. And it took the better part of a summer before I caught a fish on my own. And as soon as that happened, and I have a great photo of this, I'll have to send it to you, but I caught the fish. I come running up the stairs back to the house, and I'm like, I got him. And I'm screaming and yelling and dancing around in my bare feet in my bathing suit. And I've just got my little bamboo pole that was my grandfather's and this little sunfish dangling on the end of the line. And my dad comes out and gets the fish off the hook and, separates me from the line and everything else and wraps it up in a brown paper bag. And I run around because I got aunts and uncles and cousins and all sorts of people around. I show everybody my fish. And then I'm like, so Mom, can we eat it? And this must be like a 4-ounce sunfish. This is a tiny, tiny fish. My mom says well, we would have to take out all his guts and all his bones. And I'm just like, no, that's not for me. And so I was like, can I just throw him back in the lake? And I remember to this day the look that my mom gave me that was just no apologies. This is a blood sport. This is the lesson you're about to learn. There are consequences to your actions. And I was like, oh shit. But yeah, and there's a picture of me looking over my shoulder. There's a little sunfish in the sink, and I'm looking over the shoulder, and I look like I'm just about to burst into tears. And it was just kind of oh, there's more to this than just digging up worms. Mm-hmm. And, I remember that hit me again when I moved up to Montana in 2013, and just two things happened. I remember the first fish that went belly up because I forgot to press the barb and couldn't get the hook out. And, I wrestled with it, and I hadn't learned yet that sometimes it's just better to cut them off and let them try to work it out themselves than just to keep messing with them. And it was a little brown trout on one of my favorite creeks in Montana, and I just remember putting him back in the wire and watching him roll over. And I just, people don't think about fly fishing as a blood sport, but it is. And there are consequences. And the more time that I've spent on the river and the more time that I've spent, just trail running or skiing or doing whatever, But especially with the river, when you go to a place day after day after day after day, and like I see a packet, like a package from a treble hook, or I see like an empty spool of mono, or I find trash or beer cans or whatever. And when you go every day and they're still there every day, you're like, oh, no one's doing this for me. This is my responsibility. This is my place that I care about, and no one's going to do it for me. And and the more time I spent on the river, especially the stretch of the Gallatin that I fished the most up in Montana, it just sort of became my place. And I recognized that the more time, and I talked about this a bit in my TED Talk, but the more time I invested there, the more that place came to mean to me, and the more responsibility I felt towards it and towards taking care of it, and towards, if I took people down there, educating them about how to be responsible on the river and how to handle fish and how to press barbs and to pick up after themselves and just to take care of the place, And I just think that with everything that's going on, not to be political at all, but like just with everything that's happening, there's more people outside, there's more people in these places, that it's just our responsibility to look after them. Because if we're going to spend the time getting out there and doing the thing that we love to do in them, then it's also our responsibility to make sure that it's there for other people. And that's everything from picking up trash to making conscientious environmental decisions, et cetera. Whatever that means to you, taking care of the place. But it was just a really well-developed sense of responsibility around my immediate environment. And a lot of times that's the river, and a lot of times it's just your social circle and your relationships and your friendships, or how you treat your job, or how you treat your dog, or how you treat your car. It's just a sense of responsibility around taking care of the things that you value. So kind of where I was going with that one.
Yeah, it is important. There's a lot of government agencies that take care of parks and things like that. But what do we do if one day they're not there? Ultimately, whether they are there or not, it's our personal responsibility to take care of the things we have and be good stewards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, that's great. So now you have a kind of a non-conventional career. Now, according to the website, you had an alternative medicine practice for a while.
I have a master's degree in Chinese medicine, which is acupuncture and herbology. That I got here in Boulder in 2008. That was a 4-year program, which kind of brought me back to the Rockies, which was awesome. And I got a lot of skiing in, and I got really good at poking things with pointy objects, which I guess maybe made me a better angler. So I did that pretty much I took a year or two off after college, and then moved to Colorado to go to grad school here in 2005. Finished that program in 2008. Thought to myself, probably there's plenty of acupuncturists in Boulder. I should go somewhere where there aren't a lot of acupuncturists and I know a lot of people. And that was North Carolina, which is where I went to college. And it was awesome. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I was pretty successful, but I just missed the mountains. And I lasted about 1.5 years on the East Coast and put my stuff in storage and threw my dog in my very tiny Toyota and drove back to Boulder. And that was sort of when I got back into the outdoor industry. And I was living here, practicing part-time, working at the Patagonia shop in downtown Boulder part-time. And then sort of took on more time with that job and less time at my practice, and then took a job with Dynafit, which is a ski company here in Colorado. And went full-time outdoor, and then moved up to Bozeman in 2013 to work for Mystery Ranch Backpacks, which is an awesome little backpack company in Bozeman. If you've never heard of it, definitely look them up. Super, super cool company. And then 2015, I moved to Seattle to work for Sage.
Wow. Yeah. You have a video, the Sage video on your website, which is a phenomenal video. One of the things I liked about it, it's the emotional story that sells the rod. It's not just some marketing, 30% off this week only. You know what I mean? There's like this story.
Faster, bigger, better, more.
Yes. Today.
Sage is a really cool company. And I'm, I was not there for very long. Professionally, not the best fit for me, but heritage wise and technology wise, it's a really incredible company. And a big part of that is Jerry Thien. He is the rod designer at Sage. He's incredible. And we were trying to concept this product video for the mod rod that came out last year. And it was just like, I feel like the tech story has been hammered and, fish porn is everywhere. And I just wanted to give people an opportunity to come on board at wherever they were in their journey with fishing, whether they were they were on a traditional tackle rig and wanted to get into fly fishing, but didn't know a lot about it, or they knew about fly fishing, but maybe they didn't know about the Henry's Fork, or they knew about Sage, but maybe didn't know about Jerry, or they just like wanted to buy the next best thing that we were making and see some fish porn. We gave them that too, But I worked with some really talented folks on that shoot as well. Brian Gregson was the photographer. He's based out of Bozeman. Drew Steckline was one of our videographers. He's also out of Bozeman. And Bobby Foster is out of Seattle, super talented videographer and editor. And those three guys really trusted me because I didn't have a super fleshed out storyboard. I was just like, look, Jerry's got this story about how he came to the fork, like in the 70s in a Studebaker from Minnesota. And then there's just so much history there. And he was just talking to me about the rod in the office one day, and just about how, that rod was really designed for a place like the fork. And that type of trout fishing is why he designed fly rods. And I was just like, okay, we got to go to the Henry's Fork. That's what we got to do. And so I called Drew and Bobby and Brian, and I'm just like, this is what I'm thinking. And a big part of that is that the Henry's Fork has this very mellow vibe, and it's slow, and it's very specific how you fish it. And it really highlights the beauty of what Jerry created with the mod. And, there was a lot to it. It's a moderate action rod. It's also very slow and soulful. And even Jerry, how he talks about it, it's very slow and soulful. And it just felt like the story was so obvious. And I just think that it's one thing to be like, this is how much it costs, and this is how far it goes, and this is, here's all the specs. And that's math, and to a certain extent that sells things. But I think that story and emotion and bringing somebody into this experience in a way that almost allows them to feel like they're there, like the music is right, and the lighting is right, and the editing is right, and everything just came together that weekend. It was so awesome. Somehow we convinced them to let us fly a drone in the Harriman State Ranch. Everything just lined up, and we got, honestly, Jeff, one afternoon of shooting, and then the gnarliest snowstorm ever came in, and it was just garbage the rest of the weekend. And I was like, guys, I did everything I could. I got us a sick house to stay in. We got food, we got beer, we got Jerry, I got drones. I got the best damn film team on the face of the planet. And we had a 3-hour window. And then everything else that weekend was just making it look like more than it really was. But, that's kind of the beauty of making a film like that, is that a talented team can make it look like whatever they need to, and those guys did such an impeccable job of bringing that whole thing to life. That's as far as a piece of marketing material goes, I'm more proud of that team and what they put together than anything I've done, maybe ever.
What I liked about it, and what I like about your spirit, Catie, is just, you had mentioned earlier in the interview how the mountains, you couldn't stay away from the mountains when you went back to North Carolina, and how it just kind of gets into your soul.
Yeah.
And we had an artist on here recently, Sarah Langstrom, who talked about how it's like the yoga of fishing. Fly fishing is, it seems like it just kind of gets in your soul, and it's really deep. I don't know if you can put it into words, but can you kind of describe that a little bit about what it's like to go fishing and what it does on more of a spiritual level?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm also a yoga instructor, to add to my hippie credentials, and I've actually used that metaphor a lot. Not that it's the yoga, not that fly fishing is the yoga of fishing in general, but that they're so similar. because of, there's so many moving parts. There's so many variables. And, it's like if I'm in a yoga class and I'm trying to stand on my hands with like a knee on my elbow and I'm sweaty and try not to fall on my face or like, I don't fart on the guy behind me. I don't know. That's not the point. Like the pose is not the point. How you get into the pose, like how you work up to the pose, how you move in your body, like train your body to get there. Like that's the point. That's the lesson. Being able to, stand on your hands and with a foot in the air or do whatever, doesn't make you a good person. When you're in your car and like, if my niece is in the back seat screaming and I spill coffee in my lap and realize I'm out of gas and like left my wallet at home and someone cuts me off, like that's the moment where you breathe and that's yoga. That's real life. Like that's it, And I have to remember that when I'm on the river, because there's times where and I've written about this so many times, but like rocks are slippery. There's thorny bushes in your back cast. It's wind, there's a north wind. Like the fish don't actually want to get caught. Like everything is just, I catch myself half the time and it's such a mess. And then when everything comes together and the cast is perfect and the fish eats your fly and it all goes gorgeously, like those moments are so few and far between, but knowing that they could happen is like why you're still there and why you're trying to work it out and like why I work on my cast and why I screw around, like picking up rocks and looking for bugs and doing all that stuff. And it's like, but the catching is not the point. Like everything that you go through to get there, being comfortable untying knots, being comfortable climbing around in trees, like being comfortable being uncomfortable a lot of the time. Like that's the point. And I think that that's so true in so many areas of our lives, that if we can just get more comfortable being uncomfortable, everything is more enjoyable. It's like, I have so many friends. I've got a bunch of friends in Boulder right now that are like, oh, teach me how to fly fish, teach me how to fly fish. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I hope you like tying knots, and untying knots and, like climbing around, trying to avoid fire ants. And like, I just took a friend up to Montana, last week, and I was, it was crappy. It was super hot, super sunny, super clear. Like nothing was eating on top. And we were just kind of like standing in the river in our jean shorts, cold river up to our knees in flip flops, like just screwing around. And I was like, if you like this, you're going to like fly fishing, because we didn't catch anything. But we laughed our asses off and like made fun of each other and like had a bunch of great stories and came home with skin knees and sticks in our hair. And it was just like, I have to tell people all the time, I'm just like, if you don't like the process, then you don't really like fly fishing, because it's so much work for so little glory that you can't just be in love with. We all have those days where you're just like slamming salmon flies all day long and it's so fun. But those days happen a handful of times a year, and especially saltwater fishing. I can't even, I hate to think how many days I've spent just like trying not to get sunburned on a flats boat to catch 3 fish. And it's just, you gotta like being uncomfortable for sure. I just think getting into that place where the process is its own reward. When you enjoy the little stuff, like if you enjoy looking at bugs and picking out flies and shooting the shit in fly shops and standing around a lot, then yeah, fly fishing is for you for sure.
Now, let me ask you this question. You started fishing when you were very young.
Yep.
Is there a particular moment or the question I'm trying to ask, Catie, is when did you realize that it wasn't about the numbers, that it was about the process?
Man, I'm trying to think of like, so I had maybe the crappiest fishing trip ever. Summer of 2014. And I don't know, for some reason I decided to plan a week in the Yellowstone backcountry for right after my best friend got married. And so at like 3:00 in the morning, as I'm leaving this wedding, I'm like, oh man, this is not a good idea. I have to get on a flight in 4 hours. flew back to Bozeman, packed up my stuff. Also, I don't recommend packing for a fishing trip while you're brutally hungover.
You will forget something.
Oh, like your rod? Yeah. So, like my pre-wedding self was just like, oh, it's going to be such a great way to decompress in this wedding. And then after the wedding, I was just kind of like in the Slough Creek parking lot, like, kill me now. And so I'm with a friend of mine and we're cruising along and everybody we pass coming out of Slough Creek, like, hey, what are they eating up there? What are they eating up there? Like Mormon crickets, Mormon crickets, Mormon crickets. And I'm just like, hell, the Mormon crickets. Looking around, there are these huge crickets. You know, I mean, the size bigger than $50. They're just bonk, and they fall over. They're super clumsy. It was really funny. So I'm looking at my friend who I was with, who's a fishing guide. I'm like, do we have any Mormon crickets? And he gives me this look, and I'm like, we don't have Mormon crickets, do we? And he was just like, you forgot your rod. I'm like, you're a fishing guide. Like, come on. But we got back there, and like, I mean, I just started asking people because I thought it was funny. So I mean, we passed this guy in a Patagonia trucker hat, like, hey man, any luck? Oh, killed him. I'm like, what are they on? He's like, Mormon crickets. I'm like, interesting. So by the time, and then we're being mauled by mosquitoes. Like we can't even stop because we're getting like just brutalized by mosquitoes. And we get there, we set up our camp. It's like starting to get dark. We're barely speaking at this point. And we get down to the river and there's just PMDs everywhere, just mayflies everywhere. So we were just like, all right, cool. Like we'll catch a bunch of fish on mayflies. It'll be great. Next day comes around and I was just like, this is one of those like type 2 fun. Like it's fun later. It was not fun at the time. I was like, we're cruising along and I see this cutthroat. And I don't know if you've ever been fished in Yellowstone, but like really steep cut banks and just big 20-inch bait fishing for cutties. Like so much fun if you have the right fly. Mm-hmm. So I'm like I'm just like trying to get anything to come up and we can't get anything to come up. And I see this one fish and he's got these little scars on his back. And I was just like, I called him Scarfish and I was just like, I'm going to get this guy. And I can't get him to come up. And so then my friend's like, well, let me catch him. I'm like, okay, you catch him. I'm going up here. I come back like 20 minutes later. My buddy's got a shit-eating grin on his face and a fish in the net. And I come out, I'm like, holy shit, you catch him? He's like, no, I didn't catch him, but I did catch this. Pulls it out. There's 2 flies hanging out of this fish's mouth. One is the hopper that my friend caught him on. The other is a Mormon cricket that somebody broke off in this fish's mouth. So I get this Mormon cricket. And I'm just like, this is a gift from the gods. I'm going for it. I'm like stalking the fish. I'm still getting mauled by mosquitoes. It's threatening to rain. I'm kind of pissed at my buddy. Like I'm out of snacks. I'm just kind of like hangry and annoyed, but I'm like, I'm going to catch this fish. And, so I finally find him, my Scarfish, and he's like cruising along. I throw the Mormon cricket out there. He like sees it. He kind of comes up maybe like 8 inches and stops. And I'm like, all right. So like wait for him to go past it. I pull it back, wait for him to turn around, throw it again. He sees it. He turns. He's coming for it. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to catch this fish. This is amazing. Out of nowhere, the smallest trout I've ever seen in my entire life comes out from like behind the bank. Like goes to like shoulder this fish out of the way, and I'm just like, are you kidding? Like where did this little crapper come from? And he literally like the big like Scarfish turns and leaves, and this little teeny shit is like coming for my fly, and then right as he's about to eat it, an actual Mormon cricket falls off the bank into the water, and he turns on the thing, eats the real one, and disappears. And I just was like, are you freaking kidding me? And it's like lightning and raining, and I'm just like, Mormon crickets, what the shit is happening? And my buddy's just like, you want to keep fishing? I'm like, how much whiskey do we have? And he's like, I think we have enough. And I was like, F it, we are out of here. And it was just like, it was one of those moments where I had so many moments on that trip that weren't about catching fish that were just so freaking funny. And if I'd caught that fish, like, sure, I could just be like, oh, and then we found this fly and, I caught the fish of my dreams. And like, that's a great little fairy tale. But the fact that not only did did my friend catch a fish that had the fly that we needed in its mouth, and then I found the fish that I wanted and I got him to come for the fly. And then another fish tried to take it and then a real fly. And I mean, I'm just like, you can't make this shit up. Like, and it's so fun. Like that to me is like kind of the best. So, it's just it's not about the catching. That's not the fun part of fishing. Everything else that happens, like all the stupid crap in the boats and like just the dumb stuff that happens sitting around the campfire at night, like those are the things that make fishing super fun for me. Like teaching people how to fish. Like I've just had, I don't know, man, I've had so many hysterical, just amazing things happen on fishing trips that had that weren't about catching fish. And, on that same trip, I had a Turk's tarantula on, and I saw this fish that was probably like 10 feet down. And I was like, I'm going to get that fish to eat my fly. My buddy was like, yeah, you do that. I'm like, okay. And like, it took 5 or 6 casts, and every cast that fish would look and like come up about 6 or 7 inches and then sit and then go again. He'd look and come up. And he finally came up and ate the fly. And I got so excited that I literally just like jumped up in the air with my rod all bent. And I'm just like, I got him. And I'm like jumping around on the edge of the cut bank. And my buddy's like, I think you lost him. And I was like, oh. And he like popped off. And I was like, I didn't say I was going to net him. I just said I was going to make him eat my fly. And I just think that those moments, I have so many stories like that where one or both of us is just being an asshole and we're laughing hysterically, and it's like, that's the best, because you're just a little punchy. You've been out there all day, and those things are what make it so much fun. It's like hang out on a river all day with your best friends and make Big Lebowski jokes and just kind of like goof off, and like that to me is what's super fun. So I could tell those stories about me being an idiot on the river all day.
Yeah, those are great though. That's really what it's all about. And I think, if I go to work at like 8:30, all the cars are going to work at 8:30. You
Sure.
come home at 4 o'clock or 4:30 or 5 or whatever, and all the cars are coming home at 5 o'clock. So like, as a society, we're kind of in this. A lot of people are in this like day-to-day grind, right? And,
Sure.
and they're like sitting in front of spreadsheets, or they're wrenching on trucks or whatever.
Yeah.
They never make that effort to get into the river or the woods or whatever. Where do you see, as a society, how important is it for people to get themselves out of the norm and get themselves into the wild?
I read a piece of research. I don't know how, I've been carrying this little fact around with me for probably the last decade, but I read somewhere that 3 consecutive nights spent outside will completely reset your circadian rhythm. So like people have trouble sleeping, or insomnia or anxiety and stuff like that, there's a lot to be said for sleeping outside, and on the ground and away from electronics and noise and light pollution. And I've seen that in my own life. Like when I haven't slept outside in a while, I'm like, oh, I'm getting to that place. Like I need to go be outside. And I read somewhere else that like if you get barefoot on the earth when you're jet lagged, that it'll really temper the effects of jet lag, that you'll catch up to whatever time zone you're in a lot faster.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, I'm just freestyling right now, but like I can find these stats for you, I'm sure. But I think I read that about Tim Ferriss talks about that a lot. He has something he calls a grounding mat that does the same thing if you can't get outside because you travel so much.
Right.
But and I just like nothing. I've never come back from spending a bunch of time outside and been like, shouldn't have done that. Really wish I'd stayed in town. And I never say that. And there's just something. Every time I get to Montana, I like one of my folks have a place up there, and every time I go up to see them, it's like the first thing I just stand on the bridge by the river for probably 10 minutes, and I just like smell the place and like feel the air, like the temperature differential. And it just brings like, it's just such an incredible feeling to just be away from town and outside, and you like just to feel like you're enough, like you've got everything you need, you've got food, you got a place to sleep, like, and to have, like, I started backpacking, early in high school. I did an Outward Bound trip, and I was so lucky that my folks sent me on Outward Bound and like sent me on Knolls and gave me these experiences where I learned to take care of myself outside, because nothing makes me feel more self-sufficient and confident in my abilities as a human across the board, like not just outside, but at work and in my relationships and everything else, than taking everything I need on my back into the mountains or out to the river and eating and sleeping and playing and having it all right there. And it's so simple and so easy. And I know that that's a privileged thing to say, because I know that having the time and the resources and the outdoor education to be able to do that stuff, like, I know that not everyone has access to that. But I mean, if I could figure out a way to get more outdoor education into schools, especially for like middle school aged kids, that was such a tough time for me. It was just so hard. And it felt like all there was school and like the horrors of PE class. And like, I can't think of anything worse. I go to CrossFit now, and I feel like I'm just being forced to relive all of my middle school PE nightmares sometimes. It's like, oh, rope climb.
Exactly.
Great.
Climb the rope. Oh my God.
Oh God. But now I'm super tall, so I'm just like, oh, this only takes like 3 goes and I'm up there. But I just think that you're like your problems at that age, they seem so big, and there's nothing to really give you perspective. And it's such a, like, man, being outside is kind of a level playing field. It's like, you don't have to be super strong or super big or super tough to like get a little fire going or to pitch a tent, and it's just kind of like, I just think that skill set gives such a strong sense of confidence that translates into so many other parts of your life. That, I mean, if you have the means to get your kids outside, like, shit, get them outside. And my friend Allie, I was in Montana with last week, she's got this project called Born Wild, and it's all about reconnecting kids with nature and just raising your kids in the wilderness. It's her Instagram account, I think, is just @Born Wild. But it's a really cool project. And I just, I'm in that weird Gen X millennial, like, crossover generation where I didn't grow up with technology, but I had it, call it like early enough to still be native with it now. But I didn't grow up with that. It's like, I had a Game Boy ish and I had a Nintendo, but my sister and I were allowed to play that stuff for like 30 minutes after school. And then we got kicked outside till dinner. And, like, we had a little bike gang in our neighborhood, and we like built forts in the empty lot on our street with our friends, and like played on the trampoline in our neighbor's backyard. And, it's just like, we were just like little dirty kids, they came like, I mean, I feel like it's so funny because I'm starting to fish again in my 30s. I told my mom, I came home one night in like a sundress with a skinned knee and like dirt on my face. And she was like, I'm sorry, what have you been doing? And I was just like, I don't know what about this has turned me into a 10-year-old again, but it's kind of the best. And, like, we rode bikes and played outside and built forts, and that's what we did. And it was just like, it was so easy, it was so simple. Like, we just burned off all of our crazy energy from school playing in the yard. And I just don't feel like kids do that now, I don't want to go on a technology rant because I certainly use it to the best of my abilities. But I just, I grew up with ADD. I grew up, I was a smart little kid and probably too smart for my own good. And just like being outside just mellowed me out in a way that now is such a respite from everything else that I have to do. When I've spent too much time in front of the computer, it's just like, whew. Even if I just go stick my feet in Boulder Creek, like in the middle of downtown, it's like, I just got to get connected again, and kind of like shake off all those photons that I absorbed from my computer screen. But I don't know, I just think that it's so important. And I mean, part of me was like, should I have been a Knolls instructor? Should I have done that? But at this point in my life, leading a bunch of 18-year-olds through the woods sounds like my personal version of hell. But like, that just sounds terrible. No, I did not go by myself.
You know
Oh, you're
yourself,
not gonna?
right? That's important.
Oh yeah,
You got to know yourself so you don't get roped into
I
things
know.
that are going to make you miserable.
I know, I know. But even with fishing, man, like I just look at these high school girls that I see around town, and I'm like, oh, honey, like be 16. Don't try to be 27.
Oh my gosh.
Like ride your bike and play with your friends, and like do stuff outside and just be a kid. Cause man, we're all trying to get back there. Like I just
Oh,
like every time I meet high school kids, I'm like, this is the best. Like I swear to God, it's the best. Oh man, because you think you want to be out in the real world, making your own money and doing your own stuff, but trust me, I would kill to just have to make like a 12:30 English class and pay my cell phone bill. That would be fantastic.
or a pager bill,
I
back in
know.
the day, Yeah.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I got a
But
pager. I got a pager when I was in high school. I was like,
oh
because
man,
we sure as heck didn't have cell phones or computers in my home, but I bought a pager, and
yeah.
my stepmom was like, "You don't need a pager." Yeah, and the only person that would page me
Steelers have
was
pagers.
the only person that would page me was her. So,
Yeah, right,
maybe
right.
I
I didn't
don't
even
need
have that. I don't
Yeah.
think I even had a cell phone until I was like a junior in college, probably.
Yeah, I was a
I mean, I think
sophomore when I got a cell phone.
up
Yeah.
until then, I think I just had an email account that was like off of my parents' AOL account. And I recently got both my parents off of AOL. I was like, guys, let's talk about email. I'm going to talk to you about Gmail.
I had a Juno account, a free Juno account, and that was like, wow, that was really cool.
It just, I could not even imagine being in high school or college with like Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff going on.
Yeah.
Because like I know what it was like without it, so it's easy for me to be like taking a time out, not a problem.
Right.
And I mean, shit. I had somebody ask me the other day. They're like, "You haven't been posting very much this summer." I'm like, "Man, I have been outside all summer."
Exactly. Exactly.
If I'm not posting, it's because I'm not around cell phones, and that's the best. So you should be more excited when I'm not posting, because then you're like, what's she doing? But yeah, usually when I'm posting, I'm just trying to distract myself from staring at my computer all day.
Well, let me ask you this question. One of the
Sure.
things you said earlier was you can tell inside there's kind of like a stirring, like, oh, I need to get outside and spend some nights in the woods or spending. Do you think, because like a lot of people have grown up with computers now. I mean, we've got the
Yeah.
millennials and the cell phones or the mobile phones inside a fanny pack. They have no idea what that's all about. You
Right?
know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we've had these people that have grown up now. They've graduated college and everything, and they're we're with them all the time, and they've been on computers their whole life, and maybe they were latchkey kids and they just watched a lot of TV and were on computer all the time. Do you think that maybe a lot of people, and this goes to, I mean, heck, I was this way in my professional career before I left that particular industry. It's like I wasn't able to recognize that calling back into the wilderness. And
Yeah.
so you just it's kind of been numbed. Would you agree to that, or what would you say to that?
I mean, I think it's like anything that when you go long enough without it, you kind of forget. And you just don't miss it. It's like, I don't know, like if I don't have a cocktail for a really long time, eventually I'm just like, meh.
Right.
If I like stop going to the gym for a while, eventually I just forget how good it feels to go to the gym, and I just like, I've stayed. I think part of it is just where I live in Boulder, Colorado, and it's so close all the time, and the culture here is very different, where people are outside a lot. My friend group here is largely involved in the outdoor industry in various respects. So like we're all pretty programmed to heed the call, if I may. And I do think that people who aren't programmed to be mindful of that, they don't know. And I wish that, it's something I wish that like I wish that we weren't such a workaholic culture, where, you get 7 days of paid vacation a year and XYZ, because I'm like, that is not enough. I will go through that in a month. And, and it's just like, I kind of like this, like, I kind of like what the millennials have brought with this like gig economy where they just sort of scoot from job to job and take all this time off and want to work remotely and want to be trusted to, I've had millennials work for me where I have to be like, you have to earn accountability before I let you work from home. Newsflash. You don't just like instant trust. It's not a thing. But, I do appreciate, cause I've benefited from it, where I like work super hard for a couple months and then I take some time off and regroup and come back into another gig and kind of get to have that flexibility. I do wish that like the bigger corporations were like, get the hell out, go be outside.
Right.
It's good for you and good for us because you'll get sick less and be more productive and we'll make more money. But they just don't see it that way. And that was one of the things when I was working for Mystery Ranch up in Bozeman that was so great. Like in the summer, I got up at 5 a.m. and I would fish until like 8:36 when I absolutely had to leave for work to be there by 9 and, show up with like hemos on my shirt and pants wet to the knee and, a stick in my hair probably. And leave on my lunch break and go out to the East Gallatin and catch a couple more fish and then come back and then cut out at 4:45 and go home and fish until it was dark at 10 o'clock in July.
Wow.
And, worked a 9 to 5, also fished 8 hours that day. And, and it's like, and I get, again, like rarefied thing when you work and live between two mega, Montana rivers. It's harder and it's definitely harder in Boulder. It was really hard. PSA, people who think you want to work in the fly fishing industry, I've never fished less than I did when I was working for Sage. Never in my life.
Wow.
So, like it's a real job to like, those are real jobs. They're real 9 to 5 gigs. And there are certainly amazing perks. I definitely got to travel. I got to meet a bunch of really cool people. But there's a big difference between fishing in Missouri, and again, this is a super ridiculous, like privileged thing to say, but like sitting in the back of a drift boat surrounded by Pelican cases full of camera gear, trying to get an email to your boss, like watching someone else fish, that's
right.
it's not fishing. It's still pretty epic as far as an office situation goes, like
Right.
no lie. But it's not fishing, and I tell people all the time that like my casting got amazing because I had people like Jerry and all these amazing casting instructors that would come through. And, I was so embarrassed to cast in front of all those guys and have them just like just be the peanut gallery. Like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I'm just like, I don't want to do anything. And, but every now and then I would just grab somebody and be like, hey, would you work on this with me? Would you work on this with me? Like somebody would come through and be like, hey, like buy a drink after if you take a look at my cast and give me some pointers. And I slowly, picked up a bunch of stuff and like put in a lot of work. And now, like 2 years later in my cast, I'm pretty proud of it. I'm like, oh, I'm respectable. That's nice. But I know I'm totally veered from your original question, but that was just my PSA to people who think that they want to work in the fishing industry. Like I would say, keep your day job and then go fishing as much as you can. Because making the thing that you love your job is not always the best solution.
What?
Not always.
This is one more question for you here, Catie.
Yeah, sure.
You were talking about why we work so hard as a society. What are we chasing?
Oh man. God, Jeff, you're gonna get all deep on me right at the end. I think let me figure out how to put this because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I think we're working for freedom, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And I kind of look at work as how much of my life am I willing to trade to be able to do the things that I want to do. And I've gotten to a point at certain times in my life where I've been like, I'm giving up too much of my life for this. Like whether it's like oh, my baseline expenses have gotten so high that I need to work so much more just to make ends meet. And I don't know, I think we just can't get ahead of the stuff to get to the place where things are easy and free. And so I mean, I think that we're all chasing that freedom, if that makes sense. And my goal is to get to a point where I have to work less to cover the stuff so that I have more time to go do the stuff that I really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Did I explain that okay?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you're right on. I think you had mentioned Tim Ferriss earlier. I mean, his book, I think that's part of the reason why his 4 Hour Work Week sold so well. It was like
Yeah.
really struck a nerve, and we all want that freedom, and it's an exchange. I mean, we exchange our time and our life um for other things, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's like you get to the point. I know right out of college, like, oh, I gotta make this career. I got to do this, to make a bunch of
Yeah.
money so I can like not have to work anymore. And then I'm like too old to enjoy the money that I had, and
Yeah.
it's like it's this
Absolutely.
crazy cycle that is just driving society, and it's pushing us and pushing us. And what did John Muir say? The mountains are calling, and I must go. And that's what's like. I think forgive me. I feel like an evangelist right now. Hallelujah. No, but seriously, like that is what I think everyone's chasing inside is freedom,
Yep.
and it's right there. And even if
Yeah.
it's getting out on the river for a couple of hours after work or whatever that is, you have to like indulge yourself in freedom or you will go absolutely crazy. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we are trained to just like work all these hours and go through the KFC drive in on the way home because you got to feed the kids and you got to go to soccer, you got to go to football, you got to go to this, that. And before you know it,
Yeah.
like 20 years has gone by and you're like, wow, I got to get out of
Yeah.
this.
I mean, like when I was living in Seattle, like working all the time, I was just kind of like, I bought this motorcycle because I was like, oh, motorcycle freedom. Yes. And then this past year, I was just like, oh, this motorcycle payment is killing me. And it was that kind of thing. I was like, I don't want more stuff in my garage, like
Right.
I want less crap that I have to pay for every week and like more time to go do stuff. And I mean,
Mm.
and that's one thing that that I'm really big on, and I tell my friends this all the time. I'm just like, spend your money on experiences. Like, don't spend your money on stuff.
Right.
Just buy, like get what you need, do the stuff that you like doing, and leave the rest of it because it does not matter, and it's not going to make you happy, and it's not going to make your life better. I mean, I just like trying to think who I was just talking about this with because the last couple things that I've bought, I was just like, how often am I going to use this? How often am I going to put this thing, grab this thing and go, yes, this thing. And I bought a pair of Beats, like Bluetooth headphones.
Mm.
And I was just like, all right, I'm going to spend $100 on headphones. What am I doing? And, but like, like when I'm on the rowing machine at the gym, they're freaking great. I'm going to run a 50K with my friend next summer. And I've been doing a bunch of outside, like longer trail runs. I mean, I put those things on 4 or 5 times a week and I'm like, this is awesome. And so, like that's a couple weeks of not going out, not eating out, whatever. But like, man, those things are rad. I was like, that was a worthwhile purchase. I feel real
Right.
good about that, but like with the motorcycle, I was just like, I have a car and I have a bicycle. Like, why do I need a hybrid? Like this
Mm-hmm.
is taking up space in my brain, in my garage, in my bank account. And it's so much easier without it. And yeah, sure, motorcycles are super fun.
Mm-hmm.
But like so is being able to buy a plane ticket to like go somewhere super cool with a friend and go fishing or go running in the mountains or go camping outside. Like that's more fun. So that's kind of how I looked at it. That was like motorcycle payment with motorcycle insurance or a weekend outside doing something super cool like
Mm.
every month with that money, like spend money on doing stuff with people you care about in places that are amazing. Like spend money on that stuff.
Right.
Things, shit, man, that stuff. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. And
But,
can you tell us a little bit about your TED Talk and how that came about?
Yeah. Oh man. So I I lived in Boulder before I moved to Montana, and now I'm back in Boulder. But I was actually a volunteer for TEDx here, and it was it's an organization that really spoke to me, and I learned a ton. I met a bunch of really great people. And one thing that this guy, Andrew Hyde, who is a friend of mine here in town and is the organizer for TEDx Boulder, when he's looking for talks, the thing that he is looking for is a common problem with an uncommon solution. And I, I had been sort of on both sides of this commitment coin for a really long time. My talk was about how commitment is not necessarily the death of freedom, but the doorway to freedom. Mm. And I had been in Boulder, and like I was the kid that was always like had 9 things going on and was all over the place and running around like a crazy person, and you know, walk and talk while I go to this other meeting. And you know, that's certainly a form of commitment phobia because I was never fully into any one thing. And then I moved up to Bozeman and wasn't super excited about being there at first, and I missed my friends in Colorado, and I didn't think I would stay, so I didn't get super involved in anything. I didn't really try to make friends. I didn't really date. I didn't go out. I just kind of like went to work and came home. Mm. And at one point I was just like, man, I am bored as shit. And I'm looking around. I'm like, well, fly fishing seems to be a thing here. Maybe I'll do that. And I was staying at my folks' place while I got settled, and obviously there's a ton of fly rods in our house, and I walked down to the river one day and was like, well, I guess I'll figure this out. Asked a buddy of mine at work the next day. I was like, I think I'm tying knots wrong. And my friend Alex at work like taught me how to tie blood knots with paracord. And made the mistake of dating a fishing guy that summer. So learned a bunch. So wouldn't do that again though. Yeah, and I just kind of like the more time I spent, like that's kind of what I was talking about with the wilderness thing too. Like the more time I spent on the river, kind of the more connected I felt to the place. And it connected me to Montana in a way that I don't have that relationship with any other place that I've ever been. I don't have that relationship with Colorado. I grew up in Florida. I don't have that relationship with Florida. And there is something like I put my feet in the Gallatin River in Southwest Montana, and like I am home. That is my place. And I realized that like by doing too many things, I was not invested. And by doing nothing, I was not invested. And it was just kind of like trying to stay in that balance of staying out of everything is exhausting, you know? And the more energy I put into fishing and the more energy, like the more connected I felt with like the river and with Southwest Montana, the more energy I got out of it. You know, I felt better about being there. I cared more about being there. I started to like, reach out to other people to go fishing with. And I made this really great group of friends in Bozeman through fly fishing. And it was such a cool connection to the place, to the people, to myself, that I really, it was such a turning point in my life, and it made my life so much better that I was like, I have to freaking talk about this. Like, I don't know how to talk about this. And then I see on Facebook, like the day before they closed applications, that the theme for that year's TEDx in Boulder was rivers and roads. And I was like, oh, come on. And that was the year after the floods had happened in Colorado. So it was more a tribute to what had happened here with all the roads washing out and the rivers overflowing, and the 1,000-year flood that we had in Colorado in the fall of 2013. Mm-hmm. But for me, I had spent a lifetime like, I don't like this, I'll hop in the car, I'll go somewhere else. I don't like this, I'll hop in the car, I'll go somewhere else. And I had a classic case of no matter where you go, there you are. And I stayed in a place that I never thought I would stay in Montana. And I mean, I got knee deep in that river and never got out. And it just bound me to that place. And I realized that the more I focused on one thing wholeheartedly, and like I stopped climbing and I stopped mountain biking, and I was like, I'm just going to fish. And the big thing was the day we had a big dump at Big Sky, and I was going down to grab my skis at my folks' place and go down to Big Sky and ski. And I stopped on the bridge and I looked into the river, and I see some of the biggest trout I've ever seen in that river. just like nymphing around, just like cruising back and forth, eating bugs. And I was like, oh, screw this. And I like switched it into my other Gore-Tex suit and like took off my ski clothes and pulled on the waders and a big puffy coat and like marched through thigh-deep snow because it was super warm, and marched through thigh-deep snow down to the river. And I was like, this is probably really dumb for me to be down here by myself. But I had the most lights out day of fishing I've ever had in my life down there. And of course there was no one on the river because it was like 22 degrees outside. But the more that I cut everything else out and just focused on fishing, it was like the more I got out of it. And I think that that's true anytime that you are focusing on anything, whether it's school or your kids or your marriage or your job. The more you put in, the more you get out. And the more you try to multitask and focus on 10 things, the less good of a job you do at any of them. And, you know, I say it's like the Cheesecake Factory effect, where like if you have a 17-page menu, probably nothing on that menu is that good. But when you have like a 1-pager chef's menu with like 4 salads and 4 entrees and like 4 desserts, they're probably all real banger. Like they're probably amazing.
Right.
And I just, you know, I didn't want my life to be a Cheesecake Factory menu. And I was like, I'd rather just do one thing and crush at it than sort of, you know, do a couple things halfway. I actually pulled a Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. I pulled a quote. I had a slide in my TED Talk from Parks and Rec that says, "Don't half-ass 2 things, whole-ass 1 thing." And I am a firm believer in that, because the more that the same thing's true with work. Like when I was kind of like half looking for agency work and half looking for freelance projects, nothing was really happening. And since I've just been like, no more applying for agency jobs, only looking for cool freelance work, like in these 3 specific avenues. And like those things have started to like just come regularly now.
Wow.
And, you know, where you put your effort, you know, that's where you reap the reward. And I think that we're so afraid of commitment, and we're so afraid of like missing out on something, that, you know, we just try to keep a foot on both sides of the line all the time. And that's exhausting. And you don't get anywhere when you do that.
Right.
You know, I think at this point, I don't even get FOMO anymore. I get like JOMO, like joy of missing out. I'm like, sweet, those plans got canceled. I can only do this one thing. I'm 100% in. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So,
and it sounds like you read some similar books, but Gary Keller from Keller Williams wrote a book called The One Thing. Have you ever read that book, Catie?
No, I haven't. It does sound like it's right up my alley.
It's exactly what you're talking about. And I read it probably about 3 months ago, and I'd highly recommend it. It's the same kind of concept, you know. Talks about, you know, Walt Disney and how he built this huge empire, not because he didn't know music or movies, or all he knew was animation, but he talked about how he grew his empire by focusing on the one thing. It's by Gary Keller. So I'd highly recommend that if you're a reader. It's a great book, and it's real easy read as well, real quick. But if you got Audible, It's on there or whatever. But thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I
and
really appreciate it.
If people want to get a hold of you, what would they do, Catie?
Oh, probably Instagram. That's the easiest way to find me.
Okay.
I'm on there a bunch. I like Instagram. It's pretty.
Well, we'll put the link to your Instagram up on our website. Sure. I'm also gonna, if you don't mind, post up your a couple of videos, the Sage one, and then the TED Talk as well. I'll put that up also. Awesome. But thank you very much.
Sounds great. Of course. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon, I hope.
Thank you, Catie, and thank you for listening to the Remote No Pressure podcast. Next week, we talk with Brad Beefus, president of Scientific Anglers. And we're going to talk all about carp fishing, what he throws at them, how they act. He's going to teach us a few tricks that you guys probably already know, but they're going to be new to me. So we're very excited about that interview. Until next time, go fishing.